Welcome to the deep dive. So today I want you to maybe just take a second and think about how you spend your free time. Is it mostly passive consumption, watching, listening, scrolling, or is there something more active happening, something that really taps into your energy, your talents?
That's a really potent question to start with, because what we're diving into today, it's this idea that's quietly but profoundly reshaping things. It's called cognitive surplus.
Cognitive surplus, okay.
Yeah, and it's not just about, having a few extra hours. It's this huge collective pool of free time, energy, and, well, unique talent that's available now from the world's connected population.
And what's really eye-opening is realizing that society's dealt with this kind of surplus before, right? In some pretty surprising ways.
Exactly. We're going to draw this fascinating parallel between, believe it or not, 18th century London and 20th century television.
Gin and TV. Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah. In both cases, you see these behaviors that looked like big societal problems, but they were actually often powerful reactions to much deeper social shifts happening underneath.
So our mission today on this deep dive is really to unpack that massive shift from a world that was mostly about passive consumption towards one where widespread active participation is becoming the norm.
We'll dig into what's really motivating this change, the digital tools that are making it possible, and the incredible opportunities it unlocks for collective action. I mean, stuff ranging from the kind of amusingly trivial all the way to the genuinely transformative.
Okay, so to really get a handle on this cognitive surplus, maybe we need that historical context first. You mentioned 18th century London. Let's go back there. Early 1700s, what was the scene?
Well, you've got London just exploding.
Yeah.
Rapid population growth, early industrialization kicking in, chaotic, often grim urban life for many.
And gin became the coping mechanism.
Very much so. It was a social lubricant, yeah, but also a way to just sort of numb the edges of this unfamiliar, often really unforgiving new life. You literally had gin pushcarts in the streets.
Yeah.
People sold gin-soaked rags just to suck on, and flop houses, places where people would drink until they just passed out. It was a citywide issue.
And the reaction from the upper classes? Predictable, I guess.
Oh, completely alarmed. They saw it as this corrosive force on, social norms. They were particularly scandalized by women drinking openly in these mixed-sex gin halls. That was a big deal.
So Parliament steps in, tries to ban it.
Repeatedly. Throughout the 1720s, the 30s, they passed law after law trying to curb gin production, sale, you name it.
And how well did that work out?
About as well as you'd expect. It was totally ineffective. Distillers just, tweaked the recipe slightly, stopped adding juniper berries. Technically not gin anymore.
Clever.
Or sellers came up with these ingenious things called Puss and Mew cabinets. Basically, a hidden slot in a wall where you could anonymously buy a shot. It was this 30-year cat-and-mouse game.
So the laws didn't stop it. What did?
Well, the craze eventually subsided, but not really because of the laws. It faded as society gradually restructured, adapted to the new urban realities. The key insight, really, is that the gin craze wasn't the root problem. It was a reaction to massive social change.
Okay, that's a powerful idea. The symptom, not the disease.
Exactly. And that pattern, it pops up again. Fast forward to the post-World War II era.
Right. Different time, different surplus.
A huge increase in collective free time across the industrialized world. You had rising GDP, more education, people living longer, working fewer hours, just more time.
But how we used that time changed too, didn't it? Those traditional things, picnics, bowling leagues, they started to fade.
Yeah, largely due to suburbanization, people moving around more for work, social ties got looser. So with all this new free time, what did we do?
We watched TV. Lots and lots of TV.
An incredible amount. The average globally was over 20 hours a week. TV just soaked up the largest chunk of our free time almost instantly. It basically immobilized people on couches.
And there's the parallel you mentioned earlier. The sitcom became our modern gin.
In a way, yes. It was this infinitely expandable, readily available response to, again, a crisis of social transformation, just like gin was in the 1700s.
And you had the critics, right? The hand-wringing about the vast wasteland, the idiot bomb.
Absolutely. Roald Dahl even satirized it with Mike Teavee and Willy Wonka. But just like the gin laws, all the criticism didn't stop the growth. TV watching just kept climbing.
Was there research on why?
Yeah, psychologists came up with what they called the social surrogacy hypothesis. The idea was we were kind of hiring TV to fill a gap left by declining social
A
connection.
stand-in for real interaction.
Pretty much. And the concern was it led to underinvesting in actual relationships, maybe leaning more towards materialism instead of, spending time with people.
So again, applying that historical lens,
Mm.
the explosion in TV viewing wasn't the problem itself. It was a reaction.
A reaction to the underlying issue, this steady drop in social capital, in human connection, as society changed and fragmented. It filled a void.
Okay, that sets the stage really well. Now, let's pivot to this idea you mentioned, the milkshake mistake.
Right. This is a great story. McDonald's wanted to sell more milkshakes, obviously, so they hired researchers.
Standard approach. Focus on the product, make it better.
Exactly. They looked at making it thicker, sweeter, colder, different flavors, all about the shake's attributes.
But one researcher took a different path.
Yeah, a guy named Gerald Burstell. He basically ignored the milkshakes and just watched the customers, sat in a McDonald's for like 18 hours straight.
Dedicated. What did he see?
He noticed a surprising pattern. A lot of milkshakes were being bought first thing in the morning, like 8 a.m.,
Oh,
by commuters, alone. They almost never bought other food with it, and they never drank it in the store. They took it to go.
Okay, so what was the job they were hiring the milkshake for?
That was Burstall's insight. They needed something for the long, boring commute, something they could handle with one hand, wasn't messy, wasn't hot, tasted okay, and crucially, took a while to finish. The thick milkshake was perfect for that specific job.
Ah, so it wasn't really about it being a breakfast food in the traditional sense.
Not at all. It solved a different problem entirely. The mistake was focusing only on the product, not the job the customer needed done.
So the lessons are, understand the job to be done, and don't assume habits are sacred. They might just be convenient accidents.
Precisely. And we make this exact same milkshake mistake all the time with new media. We get fixated on the tools, the internet, smartphones, whatever.
Instead of the human desires they're fulfilling.
Right. We were often surprised when these tools were used for social connection, because maybe we thought they'd be for purely personal, isolated use. But the killer app is often giving us access to one another in new ways.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
Because pure consumption, just sitting back and watching or listening, that was never some deeply ingrained human tradition.
It was just, as the author puts it, a set of accumulated accidents. It's what we could do with the old media. Now new tools can do different jobs older media couldn't touch.
And this is where cognitive surplus really bursts onto the scene.
Think about the scale. Just in the U.S., we're talking something like 200 billion hours of TV watching annually.
200 billion. That's staggering.
It's roughly the amount of time it took to build Wikipedia, 2,000 times over. Every single year. That's the surplus. It's this massive, untapped social asset.
And we're starting to see shifts in how it's used. You mentioned younger people watching less TV.
Yeah, for the first time, really. Some younger groups are spending less time on traditional TV and more time with interactive media. Even when watching video online, they're not just watching.
They're commenting, sharing, rating, participating.
Exactly. Think about something like Lostpedia, the fan-created wiki for the show Lost. Viewers didn't just watch, they collaborated to build this enormous, detailed resource. It's proof that engagement leads to behaviors way beyond just passive viewing.
So these small individual choices, clicking share, writing a comment, editing a wiki page, they add up.
They accumulate into these huge collective projects like Wikipedia itself. The real mistake, looking back, was assuming that passive consumption was some kind of stable end state. It wasn't.
Okay, so why do people do this? Why participate? This must connect to motivation.
Absolutely. And this brings us to the power of intrinsic motivation. There's a classic experiment by Edward Dacey from 1970 using Soma puzzles.
Soma puzzles.
Right.
What did he do?
He had 3 sessions. Session 1, people just played with the puzzle if they wanted to, voluntary. Session 2, he paid half the group for each puzzle shape they completed. Session 3, back to voluntary play, no payment, but he watched what they chose to do in their free time.
And the results were surprising.
Very. The group that got paid in the second session showed less interest in playing with the puzzle voluntarily afterwards compared to the group that was never paid.
Getting paid actually made them less interested later.
Yes. Dacey's conclusion was profound. Extrinsic motivators, like money, can actually crowd out intrinsic motivation, that internal drive to do something just because you enjoy it, because it feels good.
And intrinsic motivation is tied to.
He linked it to these fundamental human needs. The desire to feel autonomous, like you're in control, and the desire to feel competent, like you're good at something. This isn't just puzzles. It affects volunteering, education, all sorts of things.
So this helps explain the rise of the amateur. People doing things for love, not money.
Precisely. The word amateur itself comes from the Latin amare, to love. It's the motivation that primarily separates them from professionals.
Does this push back against that idea of digital sharecropping? The argument that big companies are just exploiting free labor online?
It offers a different perspective, certainly. Look at the lawsuit against AOL back in 1999. Volunteer community leaders sued, saying they should be paid. But the interesting thing is, they only really started feeling exploited, only started applying that sharecropping logic when AOL shifted its focus heavily to advertising and, crucially, stopped providing visible appreciation for their work. The feeling of community and recognition mattered more than money until that was taken away.
So amateurs aren't just mini professionals waiting to get paid.
Not at all. They're often driven by completely different things incompatible with getting paid. They value autonomy, community, competence, sharing.
Let's see some examples. You mentioned Grobenites for charity. Fans of Josh Groban.
Yeah, fantastic example. It started super simply. Fans wanted to get him a 21st birthday present. Instead of a physical gift, they decided to make a charitable donation in his name.
And it grew from there.
Massively. That initial spark led to online auctions, organized fundraising, and eventually they formed their own actual nonprofit, raising over $1 million for various charities.
What's fascinating is how it started. You said it was kind of backward.
Totally. They had members before it had a mission. The community existed first, driven by shared interest, and then they found their purpose. They raised money before they even had a formal institution.
And the website? Notoriously amateurish.
Famously so. Someone described it as looking like 1996 threw up. But that's the point. It was clearly made by fans, for fans, out of love. It perfectly illustrates that feeling of, I did this myself, and it's good enough. Often Trump's professionals did this for me, and it's perfect.
Like the early days of GeoCities or something. Creation over polish.
Exactly. Another powerful example. PatientsLikeMe.com.
Right, the site for patients with chronic illnesses.
Yeah, people with conditions like ALS, Parkinson's, MS-GREP, they share incredibly detailed information about their symptoms, treatments, side effects, openly with each other.
What do they gain from that? Seems risky.
They get practical knowledge you often can't find elsewhere. Like one guy learning he could safely take a much higher dose of a drug for foot drop based on others' experiences. They learn how to navigate the healthcare maze. But maybe even more importantly,
The moral support.
huge. Just knowing you're not alone, that others understand exactly what you're going through, that itself is an enormous relief and motivator.
And this collective sharing has side benefits too, right? For research.
Absolutely. They can assemble large groups of patients with rare diseases much larger than most clinics could, providing invaluable data. Their whole philosophy is openness, which is kind of the opposite of standard medical privacy rules.
Why does that work? Why share so much?
Because the community itself is the draw. The author argues the data quality improves because of all the personal conversations about relationships, struggles, daily life. Those are what attract people and build the trust needed for that deeper sharing. The community is the value.
Okay, so we've seen the surplus, the motivation. How does this translate into coordinating actual action? Let's talk about media as a tool for that. The South Korean candlelight protests in 2008.
Yeah, a really striking example. These were huge protests in Seoul against U.S. beef imports. What was amazing was their scale, how long they lasted, and just the sheer intensity. So many people camped out. They literally killed the grass in a major park.
And technology played a key role in organizing them.
Critically, it turns out that K-pop fan communities, online forums for bands like Dongbang Shinki, along with popular platforms like Dom, Naver, Cyworld, and just mobile phones, they became the central nervous system for coordination.
So fan forums turned into activist hubs.
Essentially, yes. These weren't just places to talk about music anymore. They were tools for organizing real-world mass action.
And it had an impact.
A massive impact. The government's approval rating tanked. The president apologized, the entire cabinet resigned, they put new restrictions back on beef imports. It showed this shift Jay Rosen talks about from the people formerly known as the audience
to active participants who can coordinate and make demands.
Exactly. And it really blows up that old idea of cyberspace being some separate reality. These tools are for coordinating stuff in the physical world.
So what looks like kids messing around online.
Might actually be them building the skills and networks needed to connect, communicate, and, yeah, ultimately mobilize.
This connects nicely to solving old problems in new ways, like carpooling, always hampered by coordination
Yeah,
issues, right?
totally. Then along comes something like pickuppall.com,
Yeah.
using the internet to simply match drivers and riders efficiently. Makes sense.
But it ran into trouble.
Yeah, a bus company, Trentway Wegar, actually sued them. Their argument was basically that pickuppall worked too well.
Too well.
How? They claimed it violated old, outdated laws meant for very limited traditional carpools, like only for commuting to work or needing the same driver every day. Pickuppall made casual carpooling easy, which threatened the bus company's business.
How did the public react to that?
Swiftly and negatively. A Save Pickuppall campaign popped up, online petitions, T-shirts, the whole thing. Especially with high gas prices and environmental concerns, people overwhelmingly sided with pickuppall.
And the outcome?
The pressure worked. The Ontario legislature actually amended the law to make pickuppall legal.
That's a fantastic example of the audience creating value for each other and using social media to push for real-world change.
It really shows social media isn't separate from the real world. It's a tool for improving it.
This makes me think of that physics principle, more is different.
Philip Anderson's idea, yeah, that when you get enough of something together, it starts behaving in fundamentally new ways. Think about camera phones.
Went from a few million to billions.
Over 1 billion now, easily. Which means the odds that someone with a camera will stumble upon any major event anywhere in the world have gone from unlikely to near certain.
So amateur footage becomes the first draft of history, often.
Pretty much. Think London bombings, Taikoo, Iranian protests. Amateurs documented them first. We are literally increasingly becoming one another's infrastructure.
The definition of media itself is changing then, not just an industry.
But a cheap global tool for organized sharing, available to almost everyone.
Let's connect this back to Gutenberg for a second. Movable type. First, more Bibles.
Then pamphlets, novels, newspapers, completely new forms of expression, often in local languages, not just Latin. But it created what we might call Gutenberg economics.
Meaning?
Huge upfront costs to print anything. Massive risk if you tried something novel. And crucially, the printers and publishers, the producers, decided what was good before the audience ever saw it. Gatekeepers.
But now, we're in post-Gutenberg times.
You could say that. Like author Maxine Hong Kingston said, you just click a button marked published. The need for permission for gatekeepers is dramatically reduced.
Which brings challenges too, right?
Yeah.
Quality control, information overload.
Absolutely valid concerns. Even back in the 1500s, Martin Luther worried about the multitude of books. Edgar Allan Poe saw it as an obstacle to good information. More freedom does tend to lower the average quality initially.
But there are upsides. Compensating values.
Big time. You get way more experimentation. Think about the novel, the newspaper. Those forms evolved after print, and you get incredible diversity. Someone like blogger Melissa McEwen can write a powerful essay on her own site, Shakespeare, without worrying about advertiser courteous censorship.
So abundance might lower the average, but it expands the possibilities.
And over time, the best stuff that emerges can be better than what came before because the range of what's possible is so much wider. Plus, digital economics are different.
How so?
No copies. Really, every digital version is identical. Production costs are near zero. Sharing is easy. The infrastructure is widely accessible. This whole environment just naturally enables more generous, social, creative behavior.
Okay, but with all this new activity, new ways of connecting and sharing, we inevitably run into clashes, right? Old rules versus new norms. The Ryerson University Study Group case.
A perfect example. 2007, Christopher Avenir, a freshman, joins a Facebook group for his chemistry class. 146 members, just a study group.
Seems harmless enough. What happened?
His professor found out and reported him. The university brought 147 counts of academic misconduct against him and the others, threatened expulsion for cheating.
Cheating for being in a study group.
The university's view was rigid. Individual work must always be individual. Sharing notes or answers, even in a group context online, was cheating. They saw Facebook as just a high-tech way to pass cheat sheets.
But Avenir saw it differently.
Completely. He argued it was just an extension of campus life, like getting tutoring or working together in the library, just online.
It highlights a real tension, doesn't it? Collaboration helps learning, but just copying answers doesn't. Where's the line in these new spaces?
Exactly. It's complex. Facebook isn't a mimeograph. It's more social, visible. But it's also not quite the same as a small, face-to-face study group where freeloading might be more obvious.
What happened to Avenir?
Ryerson eventually backed down from expulsion. They lowered his grade but didn't kick him out. It showed the institutions themselves were struggling with these new norms.
This kind of situation often brings up that classic objection, the brain surgeon analogy.
Hey, yes. You wouldn't want brain surgery from someone who learned on Wikipedia.
Right. How do you counter that?
Well, first, it's a flawed comparison. You wouldn't want brain surgery from someone who only learned from Encyclopedia Britannica either, right? Some things require deep, hands-on professional training. That's obvious.
But not everything is brain surgery.
Exactly. Is the task more like surgery, needing elite professional skill? Or is it more like reviewing a restaurant where lots of amateur opinions are actually really valuable? Or even singing happy birthday to your kid?
You don't hire a professional for that.
Of course not, because intimacy, connection, the personal touch that often trumps perfect technical skill. Think about kids watching homemade Lego Star Wars videos on YouTube instead of the polished movie.
Novelty, peer connection, different values are at play.
Sometimes doing things imperfectly, but doing them with and for each other is actually better than having professionals do it perfectly for us.
Okay, so if we accept the value of amateur collective action, how do we make it work? How do we build and sustain these efforts? This must involve culture, governance.
Absolutely critical. Think back to the Invisible College in 1645 London. Scientists like Robert Boyle, Christopher Wren,
Right.
they didn't have a building. They met in homes, wrote letters.
Invisible but influential.
Hugely. They function as a philosophical college because they built a culture. Collegial relationships, transparent methods. Their motto was nullus in verba, basically take nobody's word for it, verify things yourself, and mutual scrutiny.
They turned alchemy into chemistry, not just through better tools.
But because they had one another, they had a shared culture of communication, openness, and critical inquiry. That was the key.
So what are the ingredients for successful sharing and collaboration?
Dominique Faure identified 4 key things for combinability. You need a community, a low cost of sharing, which technology helps with, clarity in the information itself so others can understand and use it, and that vital shared culture.
And often, to protect that value, you need some form of governance.
Right. Public value usually requires governance. Look at eBay. Pierre Omidyar started it believing people are basically good.
Which lasted about 5 minutes, I bet.
Pretty much. Cheating became rampant until they introduced the reputation system ratings for buyers and sellers. It showed that people will behave better if they see long-term value in participating honestly. Governance protects that value.
How do groups manage that tension between individual wants and the group's goals?
Wilfred Buyen, who studied group dynamics, had great insights here. He said humans are sort of hopelessly committed to both their individual needs and their social nature. Effective groups have to balance getting the job done with keeping members satisfied.
They distinguish between different types of groups.
Yeah, he talked about basic groups driven purely by emotion, like panic or dependency, versus sophisticated work groups that pursue shared goals, internalize standards, and govern themselves.
And the biggest threats aren't always external.
Often they're internal. Distraction, infighting, losing focus. Look at the challenges Wikipedia faces with hoaxes or biased editing from within. Good governance isn't just about rules. It's about creating a productive space we can create in.
Let's look at one more example of driving change. The Pink Chatty campaign in India.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah.
In 2009, this fundamentalist group, Sri Ram Sen, attacked women in a pub in Mangalore, claiming they were violating traditional values.
Horrific. What was the response?
Nisha Susan, a writer, started a Facebook group called the Association of Pub-Going Loose and Forward Women, tongue-in-cheek, obviously, and they launched the Pink Chatty campaign. Chatty means underwear.
They sent pink underwear to the attacker.
To the group's leader, yeah.
Yeah.
Thousands of pairs flooded his office. It was this brilliant, irreverent, highly visible act of protest.
What did it achieve?
It was a massive civic intervention. It rallied women, it signaled public outrage to politicians, it empowered women themselves, and it put huge pressure on the authorities. The leader was actually arrested before Valentine's Day, which was the day his group had threatened further action.
And this differs from something like, say, couch surfing.
Yeah, it highlights the scale of value. Couch surfing creates communal value. It helps the participants manage risks and share resources within their community. Pink Chatty aimed for civic value, trying to make society safer and better for all women in India, not just those in the Facebook group. It moved from personal to communal to public, and finally to civic impact.
Okay, so pulling all this together, How do we actually design for this future? How do we effectively harness this surplus? It seems we need to really understand opportunity and motivation.
Definitely. We need to avoid what Daniel Kahneman calls theory-induced blindness, like assuming money is the only motivator. The question isn't the simplistic why work for free, it's why are people doing this specific thing? What intrinsic non-financial need is it meeting?
And recognize these aren't totally new behaviors out of nowhere.
Right. They're often extensions of
Yeah.
much older patterns of human social life. Think about the Z-Boys, those early skateboarders in California in the 70s. Skateboards weren't designed for empty swimming pools.
They repurpose the tool.
Exactly. They pressed a tool into service in ways the designers never imagined, and then collaboratively perfected those new uses. Users often find the real value.
The ultimatum game also tells us something important about human nature here, doesn't it?
Yeah, the classic experiment where one person proposes how to split a sum of money and the other accepts or rejects. If they reject, nobody gets anything.
And people often reject unfair offers, even if it costs them money.
Consistently. Which makes no sense from a purely rational, self-interested perspective. But it makes perfect sense socially. Rejecting unfairness is a social act. It shows we're wired to care about fairness and social norms. We're incapable of behaving as if we weren't members of a larger society.
So when we look at something like Napster's initial explosion,
The key wasn't just that kids were suddenly immoral pirates or surprisingly generous. It was the convergence of factors. Digital music is perfectly copyable at basically zero cost. People will share if it's easy enough. And Sean Fanning designed a system that made sharing the simple default option.
new opportunities linked to old motives via the right setup.
That's the recipe. New opportunities linked to old motives via the right incentives.
So if you're trying to build something that taps into this surplus, what are the practical lessons? Where do you start?
Okay, lesson 1. Start small. Don't try to launch a global phenomenon on day 1. Pickup Pulse started in Ontario. Apache, the web server software, began with just a few programmers sharing patches, built the core community and culture first.
Makes sense. What's next?
Second, ask why. Constantly put yourself in the user's shoes. What's in it for them? Why should they bother? And crucially, avoid phony participation. People see right through it. Remember the Hank the Angry Drunken Dwarf incident with People magazine's poll? Users will revolt if you offer fake influence.
Right.
Third, default to social. Make sharing, connecting, participating the easy default path. Delicious, the social bookmarking site, beat its competitor Backflip partly because sharing was the default on Delicious, while Backflip made it an extra step. Defaults shape behavior powerfully.
Okay. Fourth lesson. Seems crucial.
Manage growth. This is where many initiatives stumble. The transition period, maybe around 100 users or so, is incredibly critical for setting the culture. Get the right early users, people who embody the norms you want, because it's much harder to change culture later.
And growth brings other challenges too.
2 big ones related to scale. First, people differ. More people differ more. That old media idea of a monolithic audience is dead in participatory systems. Forget the average user, diversity explodes as you grow. Second, intimacy doesn't scale. Big groups don't feel like intimate communities. They either break into smaller clusters or they become audiences again, like huge comment threads versus smaller friend groups.
Got it. Fifth principle.
Support a supportive culture. If users feel the platform managers have their back, they'll often enforce the norms themselves. Think of the quiet car on Amtrak passengers often shush noisy people because they know it's an official rule, or the simple be nice rule on the Java Ranch forum, it worked because it was enforced.
So empower the community to help maintain the culture. Sixth.
Learn and adapt quickly. You have to be constantly learning from how people are actually using your platform or tool. Flickr, in its early days, sometimes updated its code multiple times a day based on user feedback. Adapt the opportunities you offer. Don't try to force users to change their fundamental motivations.
Seventh principle. This one sounds interesting.
Rules follow value. David Weinberger's phrase, clarity is violence, is relevant here. Rules are restrictions, and restrictions are only tolerated once there's enough accumulated value in the community to make them worthwhile. Don't burden a new community with a heavy rulebook. Start lean, like the U.S. Constitution, and add governance only as specific problems arise that threaten the shared value.
And the final principle. Sounds liberating.
Try anything, try everything. Seriously, social media, collective action online. It's like this massive, ongoing, experimental wing of political philosophy. The possibilities are so vast, no one person or group can map them all out. The only way to figure out what works is for everybody to try lots of different things.
Oh, okay, so wrapping up, we've journeyed from 18th century gin palaces to modern social networks. We've seen this immense cognitive surplus, this potential energy unlocked by new tools.
And how it's unleashing all these unprecedented creative and social behaviors. It's literally changing our connective tissue, how we interact, how we organize, how we create value together.
I love that story you mentioned about the little girl watching a DVD. She runs behind the TV,
Yeah, poking around the cables. Her dad asks what she's doing, and she says, looking for the mouse.
looking for the mouse.
And that's kind of become the motto for this whole cognitive surplus idea, hasn't it? We look everywhere that people, readers, viewers, patients, citizens have been locked out, given only passive experiences, and we ask that question.
If we carve out just a little bit of that surplus, deploy it here, could we make something good happen?
Exactly. Could we enable people to connect, to create, to share value in a way they couldn't before?
The potential really does feel immense. So the final thought for you, the listener, is maybe. Where can you apply your own surplus? How can you help build or participate in a culture that encourages others to do the same?
Because ultimately what we build together won't be determined just by the technology. It will be answered much more decisively by the opportunities we provide for one another and by the culture of the groups we form. The tools are here. What will we create with them?